Okay, it says I'm live. Am I actually live?
Looks like it.
Am I live? Do I look live? Do I sound live? Okay. Yes, Joe M says yes. You can hear me? Everything's good? Everything's good? All right, good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So listen, I got good from Ben Strano. If you get good from Ben Strano, that actually means good, because if it wasn't good, he'd tell you. So listen, welcome everybody. Welcome to my new shop. I'm going to apologize right off the bat, and this goes back to Ben Strano. There is an epic shop tour on finewoodworking.com of Ben and I. Ben came to my old shop and we did a shop tour, and if you haven't seen that, you need to go watch it, because Ben didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or worry for his job. But we had a great time. Anyway, we'll try to make it just as entertaining, but of course it's just me. And of course, Andrea, who's behind the camera, as she is always supporting me, which is fantastic. I couldn't do any of this stuff without her. So we're gonna try to get to a bunch of questions. If you have questions, put them in the comments. We're going to try to get to as many as we can, but of course, you know, Andrea is juggling the camera, making sure my hair doesn't look dumb, and also, you know, making sure everybody can see what they can see. So if you have questions and I don't answer it during this live thing, I'll take a look at all the information, and I'll record some videos either on Instagram TV or maybe if this YouTube thing kicks off. This might be, I don't know if this YouTube thing is going to actually kind of go. It might just be a flash in the pan, but I'm going to give it a try anyway. And if you want, feel free to subscribe and hit the bell. That's what they say on the YouTube. Subscribe, hit the bell. So let's try that if you want. Anyway, so we're going to get started. So right now, we're going to start in the back corner, and I'm just going to get Andrea to follow me over here. So,
I'm already not.
oh, you're already, okay, hang on. All right, there you go. She's good. Okay, so the first thing was power, okay? There was 40 amps coming to this building. Actually, before I get started, this building, if you've seen it on Instagram, is a brick building, brick all the way around, fully insulated roof, insulated walls, the whole 9 yards. So this is, you know, the fact that we bought our dream home and the dream home came with a dream shop, to me is incredible. So what we did is we had 200 amps in the house, and then we shunted 100 amps underground out here to the shop. So this is a 4-knot cable that, 1-knot cable that is pulling in the 100 amps. All right, so that went through. You can probably, if you look outdoors here, well, you can't even see it anymore, but there was a huge trench going out the yard and over to the side of the house. So we put a nice big box in here and 100 amp service. So I can do anything I want out here. If I decide one day I want to quit woodworking and become a welder, I can do that. I got lots of power, okay? The other thing that we did, which is important for me because I do a lot of webinars online and stuff like that, is that we also ran 2 lengths of Cat5 in the same trench, okay? Shielded, of course, so that you're not getting any interruption. So right now, everything we're streaming from is right off of this router. So we have our own internet connection out here, which is fantastic. And the electrician, great piece of advice, if you're going to bury cable, bury more than one. So he actually ran 2 lengths of Cat5 for the cost of the material. It's not that big of a deal. But now I have a spare Cat5 cable, so if for whatever reason this craps out on me, I have another one and we're good to go. You don't want to have to redig the trench. So that was a great thing for me. So the power, lots of power. The other element here is the HVAC. So the original HVAC was this black thing up here. There used to be a wood stove in here. And I know that some of you are going to freak out because it's like, oh my God, you took a wood stove out. But listen, wood stoves are great. They're really romantic. but this isn't where we're going to lay out a bearskin rug and have wine. I work here, and there's a huge amount of space that gets eaten up when you have a wood stove because you can't put stuff right up against it, obviously, or maybe not obviously. So we got rid of the wood stove, and then what we've got is one of these split units. So outside is the condenser, and basically that's the air conditioning portion of it, and that pulls moisture out of here and it cools it. Believe me, when it was 35 degrees Celsius here, I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit, but whatever, you can work out the math. It was beautiful in here. With this, it's also a heater as well. So it's down to, at night here, it's getting about 5 degrees Celsius. So we don't want things to freeze in here. So this unit now, right now, I've got it set to 20 degrees Celsius, and it's beautiful in here. Humidity is at a nice level, and Andrea looks like she has a question.
I do. We've got some questions. Good tip on Ben says good tip. Brian is saying good move on the wood stove. Insurance can be a nightmare with that.
Yeah, insurance is brutal, yeah.
Yep. And then Joe is asking, what size is the building or your shop?
So total square footage inside is about 320. So it's not palatial, it's not huge, right? But I don't build a lot of big stuff. I also don't work a lot with sheet goods. I've never done kitchens, I've only ever done one vanity. And I'm not set up to do that sort of stuff. So 320 square feet, as you're gonna see, arranged properly and organized, works out really well. So then what we did, we've got the power. So what we did is we surface mounted everything. If you see anything that's actually in the wall, that was existing. So this shop, if you didn't see it beforehand, looked a lot different. The fella that owned this place before, he did a lot of mechanic work. I believe he was a millwright. So he did a lot of metalworking and things like that. So it was set up to do like kind of the bare minimum, but I needed more. So anything that's sunk into the wall is existing. We kept it. We put it on its own circuit, and we'll just leave it alone. Otherwise, we surface mounted everything, and every plug is wired so it's split. So the left-hand plug is on one circuit, and the right-hand plug is on another circuit. So that way, if you put two high-draw items, right, imagine a router and a vacuum into these two plugs, you're not going to pop a breaker, okay? As well, we're running heavier cord or heavier wire so that we're not going to blow any circuits, okay? So you can see this goes all the way around, except nothing on this back wall, which we'll talk about in a minute. We also, so I think what we'll do is we'll talk about the center of the shop first, because this is the crazy idea that I'm going to talk about in a second once Andrea asks me this question.
I just wanted to make sure you don't miss any steps. You didn't talk about the electricity in the ceiling,
right,
or what you had to do for wall repair, painting.
Right, we'll get there.
Gotcha.
Got it. Okay. So.
And quick question: what type of wire are you running?
Copper. It's 12 gauge instead of 14. Just a little heavier, that's all.
And are the 120 volts, I'm just going to read this question.
Okay.
Yep. On 15 or 20 amp, is that?
It's on 15 amps.
There you go.
Yeah, 15 amps. Yeah, we didn't do 20 amp plugs because I didn't think that I actually needed it. And it just, at the time, 15 amps, like when we were planning all of this out, I looked at all of the draws of all my tools and it was like, yeah, I don't need 20 amps. If I get to the point where I want to put a 20 amp plug in and change the breakers, I can do that because the wire is already in the wall. Cool?
You're
okay.
Good. Continue.
Okay, so actually Andrea brings up a good point when we talk about, so there was all kinds of like overhead storage up in here, if you remember from the Instagram. My good friend Steve Dirgarbidian and I, he came, we all masked up, and we ripped all of that down. And that just opened up the space like you wouldn't believe. As well, it's interesting. I was talking to my buddy Matt Kinney, and he was saying, that felt like a name drop. Yeah, I can drop that.
Two name drops.
That's
there.
two. Yeah, Ben Strano was a name drop, and Matt Kinney's a name
And
drop.
there's Steven.
And Steven. That's three name drops. Anyway, doesn't matter. I talked to Matt because I respect his skills as a photographer and stuff like that. And I asked him, I said, if you could paint your shop like, what would you pick that's going to be great for photography? Because I do a lot of articles and things like this. And he said, you know what, don't even worry about that. He said, do yourself a favor and paint your shop a color you're going to enjoy. And, when you look at Matt's shop, he's got those beautiful green walls. And I said, you know what, that's a really good idea. I'm not going to worry about, color cast and all that other stuff because, come on, we can sort all that out. So anyway, we went with a nice kind of a sky blue color for the walls. And then the doors are kind of a nice wine or maroon color. We picked at the Home Depot, they had like a little palette thing where it like matched a bunch of colors. So I think it turned out well. A lot of times you see shops are builder's beige or white or, or drywall or whatever. And I thought, you know what, this is kind of my dream shop. So I'm going to make it look nice. And so that's what we did.
In your previous shops, I'm asking this for people's information.
Yeah.
In your previous shops, you were putting plywood sheets on the walls.
Mm-hmm.
That was your shop back in Ottawa. That was the temporary shop in Stony Creek. Why didn't you do that here?
Right. So the nice thing about the plywood is that it's expedient, and so and fairly inexpensive. You just slap it up onto the wall, tack it into the studs, and then now you can put cabinets, you can screw things to the wall, you can nail things to the wall, you can do whatever you want. But it does darken the room quite a bit, and I wanted to do something a little bit different this time. And so what I've done is left the drywall that was already up here. I didn't put this drywall up. Believe me, if it was a choice between putting drywall up or putting plywood up, it would have been plywood all day, every day, because drywall sucks. If you're a drywaller, God love you, because I hate drywall. I really do. And I think I made a post about what I would rather do, build a river table or drywall. And sadly, it would be build a river table because I hate drywall that much. But anyway, so lots of drywalling had to get done as we did demo. We weren't as careful as we could have been when we did demo because quite frankly, we were having too much fun. And so I ended up having to do some patches and stuff like that, but I won't bore you with that because that's the hellish part of this. So let's talk about as well some other power stuff that just to finish off the power. So if we go back looking at the corner again, you'll see a line coming up out, and then it goes across to the front here. In there is 220 and 240 and 120, and then it bridges out into the ceiling here.
Hold on.
Oh, she's panning. We're panning. We're panning.
Oh my gosh. All right.
And we're back. And now she's completely wrapped up in the cord. So if the camera hits the ground, so did Andrea. On the top here, we've got all the power up here. And that was to support this kind of crazy idea that I had that I wanted to test out. So up here, we've got regular plugs, and then we've also got 220 volt up here as well. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to cluster all of the major power tools around the dust collector, okay? A lot of times in shops, you see the dust collector is off in a corner, or some mount them outside or whatever, and then you end up with a network of ductwork and everything else. And then when you start to look at that, you realize that every foot of that ductwork, you're losing suction. Every time it does a 45 or worse, a 90, you're going to lose suction. And so what I didn't want is to have to buy a huge machine just so I could facilitate that. So instead, what I thought was, well, what if I go with a 2 horsepower machine, okay? This is from CraftX, from Busy Bee Tools. This is a 2 horsepower machine. It's got the filtration and it's got the cyclone, very easy to empty, open, close, do whatever you have to do to it. And this is 2 horsepower. So this thing really sucks, all right? And the cool thing is that now all of my machines that I use every day to prepare lumber are now, each has their own line. So the longest run is 10 feet, okay? And the shortest run is 5 feet. So now what I've got here is I've got the dust collector situated in the center. I've got a jointer planer, which this is a new tool for me. I got it just before I moved. And this Raycon jointer planer is a pretty awesome machine. I'm pretty happy with it. I had the Inca, and the Inca's nice. This one is a little bit, we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later, but I'm really happy with this machine. Let's just say that.
Can I jump in for 1 second?
Yep.
So we're loving the idea of sort of putting everything around the dust collector.
Yep.
But with it being that close, what's the noise like?
Well, the noise isn't bad at all, actually. This machine is not very loud at all. In fact, it's quieter than the 1 horsepower I used to have. So this is actually quite quiet. The only difference, the only way you get this quieter really is if you moved it outdoors and then piped it all through. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So obviously jointer and planer, a lot of chips, okay? My bandsaw, I use my bandsaw differently. Well, maybe not differently, but when I studied at Rosewood, we were taught not to rip material on a table saw. So all of my ripping happens at the bandsaw. I do a lot of resawing, okay? Again, lots of chips coming out. So the suction that you're getting at these machines is awesome. A friend of mine, Dave Bedrosian, is going to be coming into the shop once this whole COVID thing kind of relaxes a little bit. And he's got equipment, because he's an engineer. He's got equipment that will allow me to test the suction at each of these ports to see how it's working out. Just from the old, kind of put your hand up against it test, it's working really well. So you've got this machine, and then this is the closest thing that I have to a table saw. This is an old Inca that has the mortising attachment on the other side, which I haven't used very much since I got the Pantorouter, but it's there. This is my table saw. It basically gets used for precision cuts, precision cross cuts, precision rips, but I don't often use it for rips because I don't have to. So I've got these 3 machines, and then I've got this sort of octopus here. Well, I guess not an octopus, it's a tritopus. No. This originally had only 2 heads coming out of it, but I swapped it out, got one with 3, because now I've got everything that I need. I've locked it in pretty tight. In some cases here, I've added a little bit of, kind of a buffer here so that it's not coming in. This allowed me to use half of a hose instead of a full hose. So that worked out fairly well. But these machines now are all running off of this dust collector. If I want to unplug one side and add to another machine, like some of the stuff that's back here, we can talk about that in a minute. But for the most part, this is working really well. So in this back corner is where I'm going to eventually be putting my wood storage. So I know it's not very much, but I don't buy lifts of lumber at a time. I buy kind of what I need plus 10, 20%, and then I build from there. Most of my lumber is in the garage right now, taking up valuable space in there, but I didn't have time to get all that sorted out for this little video, so we'll wait. But basically what this allows me to do is that I have a set of sawhorses that I'll set up over there, and that will allow me to pull the lumber out. I'm going to store it vertically, not horizontally. Horizontally takes up a ton of room, and the board that you always want is at the very bottom of a horizontal pile, whereas with vertical, it's just a matter of moving stuff aside and grabbing the board that you need. So I saw that first at Rosewood. Obviously, they're not the first people to do it, but that's where I learned about it, and it works fantastic. So I can put it onto the sawhorses, then I can go at it with a piece of chalk and a measuring tape and start to break out my components, right? Then I can take my saw bench, which is right here underneath the bench, and I can use it either with a hand saw or with a power saw, and I can start to buck my lumber to length. Once I have that done, now I can come over to the jointer, get my face, get my edge, then come over to the bandsaw, do whatever work I have to do there, convert the machine quickly to the planer setting, plane the thickness, and then I can do any sort of final cross cuts here. Or if I want, I can also do them if we just flip around to the other side here on the MFT. Okay, so I have a couple of different options. So I'm on the fence about whether the Inca stays or not, because I can do some pretty darn accurate work. If you own an MFT with a track saw, you know you can do some pretty precise work there. So I'm not sure if the Inca will survive, but if it does, it's a nice tool to look at. You got any questions there at all?
No, not so much a question, but I was just thinking, we've got a nice comment about loving the big windows and the natural lighting.
Yes.
So I was also remembering that you did some window treatment. I'm wondering if you just wanted to mention that.
Right, so yes, we will get to that area, believe me. We're gonna spend a ton of time in that area because that's a cool area. So the MFT, like I was saying, fantastic. Then moving over, next we've got this beautiful old Buffalo 18, okay? This is a fantastic drill press. It has a beautiful Albrecht chuck, German chuck. It is just friction, no tools, and a bit has never slipped in this chuck. I think this chuck is probably worth twice what I paid for the whole thing. So drilling holes is fantastic. It's a great old tool. Under here, it looks like that I've got a bomb being built under here, but that's actually a vacuum press. So this is on permanent loan from my buddy Steve, again at Black Walnut Studio. He lent this to me because he's got a better one now. So I get his throw-offs, which is good because he actually ended up with the Inca joiner planer. He gets my throw-off. So we just basically, it's new to us, but it just keeps the tool lust down a little bit.
Can I interrupt for a quick question?
Yeah.
So a question of, does the rigid sander hook up to the main dust collector also?
No, it doesn't. We'll get to that in a second. It can, but it doesn't. And I'll show you why. It was just a convenience thing.
Your friend Scott's being funny, that's all. Okay.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you, Scott, for providing entertainment for everybody. Then we go over here, the DeWalt 735. Everybody has seen this thing before. I put it over here for now because the 10-inch capacity of the joiner planer from the Rikon, it's not often that I need that extra bit of space. And so it's just kind of hanging out here. This cabinet is on wheels. And so I can move this out and use it if I want. This cabinet has followed me around for years. It is old and gross. It holds all of the stuff that, pliers and things like that. I bought this at Cardin Tools just outside of Perth, Ontario. He was displaying something on it and I said, well, can I have this? And so he's like, yeah, sure, take it. So this thing the drawers are horrible in it. And one day I'll build a new one, but that's not even close to being a priority. Speaking of storage, these came with the shop. I'm of two minds with these cabinets. They're relatively inexpensive. They're wood particle core with melamine on the top. I mean, I don't know. They do what they're supposed to do. They hold stuff, but I'm not convinced that I like the look of them. So I may end up maybe just keeping the cabinets and then putting wooden doors on here or I likely will just end up making it one of those things that I'm going to do where I just take them eventually. I'll just work them out and put, nice ones that I build in there.
Well, you had mentioned the idea of a French cleat, is it?
Right.
Would you do that instead?
Well, the French cleat is the attachment system. So that's how these, if you come over here, you can see the French cleat is mounted underneath here. So that's how these are mounted. But the doors themselves are kind of what I don't like. They're just sort of cheap looking and man, I don't know. Woodworkers like wood, so that would be nice.
Ooh, good suggestion to paint them with chalkboard paint or whiteboard paint stuff.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea. I could do that, but then I would have doodles on everything, which is not necessarily a bad thing. The reality is I'm going to be putting like posters and stuff up, because the one thing I haven't done a lot of yet is kind of personalize the space. Like I have posters that I haven't put up yet. I have mementos from various shows and things like that. So I haven't put any of that kind of stuff up. Concert posters, that sort of thing. But yeah, so these I'm not convinced. So anyway, we'll see what we can do. Chop saw stuck in the corner here because I don't use it very often. I use it when I'm cutting 2x4s and stuff like that, but I don't use it for furniture making, just because for me it's not accurate enough. There's a good blade on it though. There's a Forest Woodworker 2 on there, which is nice. It's probably worth 10 times the price of the saw. The saw was given to me by Terry Saunders, who works in the R&D department of Veritas. He was just getting rid of it because I believe his brother-in-law gave it to him, and then he was like, here, take it. And so anyway, it does the trick.
We seem to have a discussion going on a bit about the cabinets.
Okay.
And right now, it's winning for you to just not have them. There's no soul. They have no soul. And
that's how I feel. That's how I feel. There's no soul to these. They're like, yeah, I feel you. I'm with you. And really, I bought I can't even believe I'm going to say this. I bought a domino and I haven't used it yet because I haven't had time to use it yet. So I thought, well, what a great project. I could knock out a bunch of these cabinets and I don't even have to cut joinery in the sides, or I'm just going to domino everything together, and that'd be a great way to learn the tool. So I think that's what I'm going to do instead of just trying to salvage these. And I'll bring these to the Restore or something like that, Habitat for Humanity or whatever, because I'm sure someone can use these, but just not me.
And quick question again, you've talked about sort of walls and storage and things. Have you done anything with the flooring in here?
Nothing. I've done nothing. This is a poured concrete floor. Oh, there's the screw I was looking for the other day. It's just a poured, and it's not poured particularly well. There's spots where you feel like you're going uphill, so it's not the best floor. I haven't done anything with it, mostly because the doors are metal, and if I add flooring, I gotta figure out how that works. Like, do you trim a steel door? Like, how does that work? I'm not sure. I've always had this idea that it would be a cool floor to, like, every time, when you're driving around and somebody has pruned their trees and you end up with like branches about this big around, I just thought it'd be cool to build a jig that would consistently cut like end grain pieces off of that and just put them in a box, and then whenever you feel like it, take a little bit of PL Premium and stick one to the floor, and then beside it stick another one, and then eventually make it so that you have like a wood cobbled floor. Anyway, that's an idea that works in my head. There's probably 10 reasons why I shouldn't do that. But anyway, so the floor, it was painted poorly. So you can see that like there's all kinds of scrapes and stuff coming out. I'm not sure what I'm doing with this yet. I thought about putting vinyl down, but that can become slippery. I thought about wood, but then wood, you end up with thickness issues. And because this is so wonky, I think it would be a nightmare to try to flatten all this out. So I haven't gotten there yet, to be quite honest.
Would you put any like type of anti-fatigue mats in different spaces?
Yeah, I think I will. Anti-fatigue mats are great for standing on when you're doing a lot of standing. but I'm not going to put them down yet because I'm not sure where those areas are going to be. I also thought about that gym flooring. I think Mark Spagnolo has got the thick gym rubber flooring in his shop, and he's got it basically like around his machines and stuff like that. So I was looking at that as well. But again, it's kind of low priority. If the floor was dirt, I probably wouldn't care much.
It's funny you say that because Brian is saying it'll become high priority when you drop one of your Japanese chisels.
Yeah, that's a good point. I have actually dropped a tool once already, and fortunately, like, I don't know how it happened, but it landed like business end up, and it didn't damage anything. But you're right, that will be a priority once. Yeah, I hadn't really thought about that, Brian.
And then a comment is, he did his concrete floor in insulated dry core.
Okay.
He said that's pretty darn good.
Oh wow.
It rocks.
It rocks. Okay. Well, I will have to have a talk maybe with Mark and see what.
That's Brian.
Or Brian. Oh, Brian did that.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll have to talk to Brian. Is that our Brian?
That's Brian. The Brian.
The Brian.
Yes.
Our Brian. Okay. I say our Brian. Brian takes a bunch of webinars with me, and we've chatted, and he's given me some pretty good business advice. Thank you, Brian. I'll talk to you about that offline. So then we got a lathe. Okay, I'm not a turner. I am not a turner. Not that there's anything wrong with turners. I just understand that in order to be called a turner, you have to dedicate a bunch of time to turning, to be really, really good at it. I can do the bare minimum kind of stuff with a lathe. I can turn pulls. I can turn legs as long as they're at least 15 feet apart from each other, so you can't see how badly they aren't the same. But this little lathe has been really good. The variable speed on it is fantastic. It's reversible, and it's been a nice little tool. So no dust collection here. I know that you can get like kind of big sort of hoods and stuff, but I'm not, again, I turn so infrequently that I think I want to turn more, but I just don't have time. I'd like to turn little bowls. I like the idea of doing that kind of stuff. My buddy Pat Lap, he turns a lot, and every time, like, I've worked a lot with him, shooting videos with him and stuff, and I love watching him turn, and I think, oh man, I gotta turn more, but it's not something that I've made time to do. Okay, so then carrying on along this wall, the thickness sander. If you've never had thickness sander before, I'm telling you, it is worth its weight in gold. It is fantastic. I like using it to dimension inlay stuff, but anytime you want to kind of get to a precision sort of thickness, or if you're working with material that would normally explode in a jointer and planer, you start getting below 1/4 of an inch, then you start getting into some issues. So this makes it so that you don't have that problem. Again, I mounted the elbow here onto it, and what I'm doing right now is I've got this little Raycon dust extractor, and the question was about the rigid. Where does it hook up to? It hooks up to this little canister, and so again, I didn't want to have to like get big. It's got to go up, it's got to go across, it's got to go down. So in this case here, what I did was I had this already. Because I had nothing really for dust collection other than small units like this. So I just maintained some of these. So this little Raycon machine is really nice. And it has a 4-inch outlet, or inlet, pardon me. And then, so that services this. And then as well, the dust collector on this rigid, okay, it goes from a 2.5 to a 4. And if you own one of these already, you know how awesome they are.
We have 2 comments from Ben and the Wood Lab saying thickness sanders are life-changing and drum sanding is game-changing as well. So
absolutely. And yeah, I can't really say anything more. I mean, they are fantastic. Ben knows about this because he's cranking out beautiful instruments lately. And so, you know, getting down to a specific thickness, if you want a top that is like 2 mil thick or whatever, then you can dial that in with one of these machines. It's got the digital readout as well, so that you can like kind of zero in on, you want to remove like 2 thou worth of material, then you can do that, which is fantastic. Okay, and then, so the rigid sander, chalkboard, okay, normally the chalkboard is where I figure out joinery. I stand here and I scratch my head, but the other thing that's on this chalkboard right now is a critical part to any shop kind of design and layout, and that is this sort of quarter scale drawing of the shop, okay? So I had my windows indicated, I measured this whole place up and then created this, and then I created these small pieces, which again are to scale, and this is how I originally thought I was gonna lay out the shop. So we've changed things up a little bit compared to what we actually did, but a lot of the things, so the bench was facing the window full on, but I changed that, and we'll talk about that in a second. I knew that this was going to be kind of storage and clamps, which it is. The MFT is in the right spot, the drill press is in the right spot, the lathe is, thickness sander, spindle sander, all that stuff. I thought I was going to have a jointer and a planer, right? So because I didn't go with the jointer, it's gone, right? Which is nice because now you get lots of room through here. I think this would have been a little bit constricted if it was the other way around. And then I also had ideas about putting a full-size table saw in here, but decided against it because, again, I just don't use a table saw often enough. And for what I do use the table saw for, I've got the track saw and I've also got the ability to use this little incline. So, so that kind of changed. The nice thing about this is if I get another crazy idea in my head that I want to move everything around, instead of moving all this big heavy equipment around, all I can do is start moving things and check it out. So this was the thought here, is that you can see by centralizing the dust collector, I get valuable in and out space all the way around here, okay? Whereas if you line them all up or what have you, if you've got a bigger shop, you can do that. But in this case here, 320 is not huge, it's not small either, but this allows me to get the valuable in-feed and out-feed areas while clustering everything around the dust collector. So far, so good. The last in the lane here on this lane is the Pantorouter, okay? I got the Pantorouter just before I moved. I got to make one joint with it just because I couldn't not use it. I've seen the Pantorouter for years and years and years, and finally there's one here. So if you've met Matt Shelton before, great guy, reps this product really, really well, and I can't wait to cut all kinds of crazy joinery with this thing. I know people who do have it, love it, use it all the time, so I'm excited. If you've never heard of a Pantorouter, look up Pantorouter, it'll blow your mind. Okay, going back to the power in the ceiling. So the reason why it's in the ceiling right now is that I wasn't convinced that this was going to work. And so what the plan is that if this setup works the way I want it to, instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a pole down into the center here.
I'm having some camera issues.
Okay.
My feed is delayed, and so it's backwards.
Okay, just look over the top.
I'm trying.
Okay, there you go. So this is coming down from here. I'm going to put a pole down here.
See,
down here.
I don't have a feed right now.
There you go.
Hold
Okay.
on.
So the pole is going to come down, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to mount the electrical to that, right? And then it'll make it a little easier to plug in. Right now I've got it kind of just held in place. This isn't an ideal situation for the 110 stuff because it is like if you pull on this, it's going to come undone. They do make twist lock for 110, but they're expensive. And you know, the 220 has it already. So ideally, this isn't going to stay up here. This was just kind of a temporary thing to prove out this system here. Okay. Okay, let's talk a little bit about, I've got on this side here, again, these big cabinets, okay? These cabinets do the trick, but again, not very exciting. They're kind of your usual sort of MDF stuff. So in here, I've got all my sort of finishing stuff. My Fuji system is in here and everything that I use. As well, I've got this old cabinet here. This is eventually going to be my setup for, if we can come just a bit closer.
Yeah, I just want to get my comments. I'm sorry, technical issues.
Okay, no problem.
Hold on. Thank you, Ben. He says I'm doing great. Oh, and there's a question that I missed.
Oh, what's that?
It might be about the Pantorouter.
Yeah.
Was that the same machine they demoed at Finally Working Live?
Yes.
Or am I, maybe I missed it?
No, I think they did. Yes, they were there one of the years. I can't remember now.
Okay.
Yeah. Ben might actually be able to answer that question better than I can. Not to put you to work, Ben, sorry. But anyway, speaking of Ben, Ben really inspired me with his storage solutions. And so this is not what I came up with, Ben. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to create dividers in these drawers. These are great hardware drawers because these little boxes kind of fit in them nicely. And they're nice and long. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. So this is going to become where I store all my stuff, nails, screws, hardware, various bibs and bobs. This is a good old cabinet that people were just getting rid of, so I snapped it up for next to nothing. So that was pretty cool. So that'll get fleshed out a little bit better. And then of course, clamps. You can never have enough clamps. I may have too many clamps, but I don't think that that's a possibility. So I really am a big fan of the cabinet maker style clamps. I find that whether I'm doing a panel or a carcass or whatever, they work really well. I really like their new fast acting clamps. These have got a really heavy duty bar in them. So I mean, the amount of force that you can put down with these things, like I read the numbers, I think, my goodness, who needs that much force? But I guess if your joinery's not all that great, you probably do need that much force. But they work really well. Everything in, Vestie's line, I mean, they're the best friggin' clamps ever. So I've used them since I started woodworking. And I just find that, you buy them once and then you don't have to worry about them. I've had the Princess Auto or the, what's the American version? Harbor Freight. I've had those clamps before, and we all have. They work for 3 or 4 months, and then they don't work. So instead, my father used to say, if you buy a good tool, you only cry once. When you buy a crummy tool, you cry and you cry and you cry every time you use it. So I think that that's good advice. So anyway, so clamps in a convenient location for me. And then sharpening station here. The Tormek, I've been using the Tormek T8 now for probably a year and a half. I have no plans to ever go back to another sharpening system. It's not for everybody. It's a little bit pricey, but I was very fortunate to work with a guy named Stig Rutan, who was the rep out in Europe for Tormek, and he basically gave me the ins and outs of this machine and showed me how incredible it was, and so that's where I made the decision to go with it. A lot of people ask whether or not I have this and then also augment with stones. I do not. I do everything complete from grinding to honing to polishing on the machine. Shameless plug, we have a seminar coming up, a webinar coming up. You can go to my website. It's about sharpening with the Tormek system. So if you're interested in it, if you're wondering whether or not it's worth it or not, or whether or not you own it and you want to kind of see how I use it, then you can check that out.
And it's also, I believe, half sold out.
And it's half sold, so you need, yeah. So if you're going to do it, because
So wait.
because they fill up really quick. I've been very very happy with how the webinars have been selling, and so if you want to check that out, you can do that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about hand tools. So this area here is kind of a hand tool area, as you can see. I've got my bench that I've had right since I built it for the first book for Minimalist Woodworker. Minimalist Woodworker Part 2 is coming out next year, so stay tuned for that.
Can you pause for 1 second?
Yeah, of course.
Tormek really quickly.
Yeah.
What is the height of that Tormek table?
Oh dear. Hang on.
And I suppose, does it matter?
Well, it does matter. It's what you're comfortable with. This is it's 770 millimeters, and for those of you down south, 30 inches. I don't know if that's the ideal height. It's the height I like to work at. It could be a little bit higher, but I really like these. You probably noticed I have a thing for these IKEA holders. They're basically designed to be a mobile island. They sell for about 70 Canadian dollars. My pal Linda Manzer, the guitar maker, she uses these for everything. All of her tools are mounted onto these various sanders, various tools, router stations. She buys one of these for every one of them. And so when I saw that in her shop, I thought, oh, that's really smart. So I've I got 3 in here right now, and I could probably have a 4th. But these things are great. So really inexpensive tool holder, and they're wood, and you can adjust them. I'm going to build it. I might try to build some shelves in here, some drawers to put all of the jigs and fixtures for the Tormek in there. But we'll see. Again, not a huge priority. When I sharpen, I don't want to make a career out of it. I just want to get it done. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, and we got some chit chat. Thank you for answering people are answering each other's questions as well. So that's awesome. Thank you.
That's good. That's good. Hopefully no fist fights break out on the internet while you're answering questions with each other. Yeah. But I appreciate people chiming in and giving their opinion because it's good.
I feel like the rewatch of this could be a drinking game. And every time you name drop, someone has to take a drink.
Who did I name drop?
Linda Manzer.
Oh, Linda Manzer. I'm sorry. These are people I know. Anyway, that's fine. You guys can drink and rewatch this if you want. Or you might be drinking now. I mean, it is, well, in Newfoundland, they've already been drinking, so. Okay, any questions? You're looking at your phone.
I'm looking, but there's nothing coming up.
Okay, so hand tools. So workbench that I built in the book, the only addition to this workbench that's not in the book is the record vise. Very, very simple to add on to. And in fact, the best video you could ever watch on installing one of these vices is by Paul Sellers. If you know who Paul Sellers is, another name. Okay, great. I met Paul down in the US when he was doing a lot of teaching with the shows. I was as well. And so we shared a stage for a while, which was fantastic. I learned so much from him. We used to tease each other because we had sort of different philosophies with hand tools. And he would, I would show up after him and he would say, okay, well, don't go anywhere because Vic's going to come up here and try to disprove everything I've just told you, which was great. We had a blast doing that. He has an awesome video on installing one of these vices into this style of a Nicholson bench. So if you want to check that out, that saves me from having to make a video and doing it. So the bench still serving really well. It's getting pretty beat up over the years now, and I might build another. I will likely build a very similar bench to this, but I'm not going to get into that quite right now. I like having my tools out. I like being able to just reach over and grab. And so I have this window space, which is lovely. It lets in the beautiful natural light. I did have it the other way, and that works really well, but then you lose all of this space. And so I turned it this way, and then now I've got all of this space where I just put up this second piece here. This is all just magnets behind there, okay, rare earth magnets with the little cups. If you put the cups in and then the magnet in the cup, that increases the strength of the magnet, so these things are not going anywhere. So if you want to come maybe a bit closer, Andrea, and then you can, people always love seeing what's on the shelf and all that other stuff. I had Ben Strano send me a whole bunch of pictures of his because I was fascinated by what he had on there. But again, everything's wood, the casements are wood, the trim is wood. I put up just some basic wood trim. And that allows me to kind of hang stuff, right? The things that I need the most, my joinery saws, my Japanese saws, my chisels, also just various sort of, bric-a-brac, that people, Richard Wilde made this beautiful little lump hammer for me, and Byrne made this beautiful little, this little coffin smoother, which is fully functional and works remarkably well. Nice little boxwood thing. But yeah, so just various things, chisels, dividers, which I use an awful lot because I don't like math as well. Kind of, so this is sort of like the measuring and marking side of things, different awls. And things like that. I also keep an eye on the temperature and humidity in the shop because, of course, that's important as a woodworker. But like I said, this place is fully insulated and it's really comfortable. It is 21.8 degrees Celsius and 44% humidity, which is lovely, right? So stuff in the windows, sills, hammers and things, stuff that I don't use as often. And then you have this bench, which is an experiment. This is basically kind of screwed together it's made out of 2x12s. And I'm kind of calling this a planing bench. So I've got some hand planes here, down here. And the idea is that I've been doing a lot of pull planing lately, the Japanese style planes, and so the idea is that here I can put a piece on here and I can grab a plane and I can just pull towards myself and work. As well, if I want, I have holes running up and down here as well, so I can use a hold fast in here. I just recently put this in place, which I think is in the wrong spot. I think it needs to be over that way so that I can use these holes. But the idea is that I can dovetail from here. Okay, if I want, I've got underneath the bench, if Andrea points down there, you can see I've got a Moxon style vise, a lion press that I also use for dovetails when I do them. So there's all kinds of options here. This was an experiment because I wanted to see how inexpensively you could make a really functional bench. And so far, like this is literally, you can see there's no joinery. It's screws and glue and various components that just kind of hold things together. It's very solid, takes up very little room. And it's not the widest, but really how often are you using your kind of full width, right? My bench usually ends up as a crap stacker. And you have to remove a bunch of stuff off of there in order to get back to work, which is what my table saw always was as well.
Quick question about having tools like the chisels and stuff by the window.
Yeah.
Have you found that they get cold or anything to work with them?
No, I haven't noticed that yet, although we're just getting into the fall now here, so, that's interesting. No, they seem okay. Again, the windows are not The windows are double pane, but they're not, I wouldn't consider them to be like really good windows. But I don't feel much of a temperature difference. It's probably only 10 degrees Celsius out, but I don't feel any temperature difference here. So I think they'll probably be okay. If it gets to be a problem, then I'll probably do an Instagram video and just show you what I did to fix it.
A couple questions coming through.
Yep.
How high is the experimental planing bench?
Mm-hmm.
And then just the suggestion that you could put jackets on your chisels, I suppose.
Chisel jackets. There's an idea. Those folks at Texas Heritage could start making chisel jackets.
Is that a name drop?
No. Don't be like that. So this is 950 mil or 37.5. So that's how tall it is. I wanted it a little bit taller because when you're pulling tools, of course the Japanese typically don't work standing, but when you are working standing, I find that having a little bit of a higher bench is a little bit better. If I do change something about this particular bench, it would be the height. I would come up a little bit higher. I'm in my mid-40s, and being bent over for any amount of time is it starts to get annoying. So I would bring this up just a little bit. Not quite as high as perhaps like a joinery bench, which would come up to your elbow, but it's kind of maybe somewhere in between my wrist and my elbow. You know, there, right where the oak leaf starts. So anyway, going back to the window here, you know, the infamous tape collection. We all know how lovely tape is in the shop. And then of course all the marking and measuring stuff over here.
A few more comments and questions.
Sure.
So Ben is saying that he hasn't had an issue with chisels in the window, even in the winter. What about racking on the planing bench? Is there a diagonal brace?
No, there's no diagonal brace, but there's no, like, I've got it up against the wall, which is going to really prevent stuff from happening. I think it's because it's new, it's not going to rack, but I think it will rack. Okay, and so one of the things I thought of there was that if I just simply enclose the back area here with a piece of plywood and screw that into place, that would probably be enough to reduce the racking completely, or I can put a complete back on it, simply surface mounted. The whole point of this was not like to build a beautiful planing situation. The whole point of this was like how inexpensively with commonly sourced materials can I build a functional workbench. And so basically two 2x12s and a 1x12, or sorry, 2x10s and a 1x10, and I built this bench. So, you know what I mean? I've been kind of, you know, part of what I was doing with the hand tool book was removing barricades for people who wanted to woodwork. And if you have to go and buy the most expensive tools and, you know, spend $1,500 on lumber for, you know, whatever workbench that you think you need to build, that doesn't help somebody get into the sport. Whereas if you get, you know, if you pick up a vintage plane or make your own planes, you know, you can kind of get into the sport a little easier. So my goal is always to make more woodworkers. So that's what I'm trying to do. But yes, I do agree that this will likely rack. It's not right now. You could stiffen it up by adding some joinery to it. You could add a few dados here and there. You could also change the way you did the feet. There's all kinds of ways that you could improve that. But again, I wanted you to be able to spend an hour, and I'm testing it out. It'll likely end up as a video or an article, perhaps somewhere down the road. But I want to prove it out first before I do any of that. Any other questions so far?
No.
Okay. So the only other thing that I wanted to talk about was surplus tools. I inherited this tool chest The person that owned this chest, basically, they traveled from England in the 1800s. They were a journeyman. No, they weren't a journeyman. They were actually a cabinet maker, and they worked for the Grand Trunk Railroad here in Canada. They basically came over with their tools in a trunk and then built this here in Canada because you wouldn't have had access to bird's eye maple and stuff like that. Likely all of these woods are North American woods, so at the time likely wouldn't have had them. So I inherited this chest, which is good. I didn't have to make my own. But in here is some hand tools that I don't use as frequently. There's a bow saw. There's a really crummy chariot plane that I made my first attempt at a little infill. It's embarrassing. I'm gonna put it away. But there's all kinds of sort of tools in here. There's my panel saws that I use because sometimes the panel saw is the way to go. And then, extra chisels and things like that in the chest. So this is stuff I don't use all that often. I did work out of this chest sort of all the time for a period of time. And I didn't mind it, although I have to say I do prefer having things out in the open and being able to just grab and go as opposed to having to surf through there. Not that it's a colossal pain in the butt to do that, but the reality is that it's good for extra tools for me. This is the way I prefer to work, is to have everything out in the open. So that's the shop. This is by far my favorite shop that I've ever had. This space, I feel very creative in it. I think, painting it and treating it more like you would treat an interior space in your home. I feel like that has kind of warmed it up for me. It's made it more creative. The other cool thing that I like, and has always been a dream of mine, is to have a separate outbuilding, as opposed to working within the house, whether it's the garage and I know that a lot of us are kind of hemmed in that way. I was for almost 20 years, where it was a basement shop. I had one in a garage one time. And then now having this is kind of like, for me, this is a dream come true. Being able to walk from the house and kind of enjoy listening to the birds and looking at the fall colors as you're walking towards the shop, and then coming inside here is fantastic. I know that anybody who's got a shop kind of in a separate building from their house has always said the same thing. People joke and say, oh, well, you won't be saying that in February. When it's minus 20 C and snow flying, but I'm really not all that worried about it. That's what winter boots and a doeskin jacket are for, so you can come out and do that. But yeah, so I don't know if there's any other questions.
I've just been letting them come in a little bit.
Okay.
So the first one is, what bad axe saws do you have in that chest?
Oh, okay. So I've got, this is a crosscut here. This is kind of a full length D8.
Can you tilt it towards me? There's a good glare. There we go.
So this was the first one that I got, which was the crosscut, because when you're working with 12-quarter, whatever, walnut, there's not a lot that's going to crosscut that easily for you. So I ended up going with the crosscut version of it, which I love. Mark does. If you've never owned or tried one of these saws, you really have to. Mark is an artist and a technician with this stuff. And then recently, I had to do ripping at my bench, and so this is a smaller panel saw with rip teeth. And so this allows me to rip at the workbench or to rip on the saw bench, whichever I want to do. I didn't get the thumb hole because I don't do long rips like that. But this is definitely a nice piece of equipment. Cherry handles on this one, walnut on the other. And then the other two bad axe saws will just come in behind Andrea here. And then this is the one that started it all, the Copperhead Killer from Bad Axe. Basically, it's a carcass saw, and I cut dovetails with this, or I used to cut dovetails with this a lot. But now any other hand joinery I have to do, if anything's complicated or requires too much thinking about how to do it with machine, then I'll just grab this and do it this way. Mark doesn't do these copper backs anymore because the rejection rate was too high. Mark is a huge stickler. He's a perfectionist. Everything, the nuts are always clocked. Everything is always done beautifully on these saws. So that's the Copperhead Killer, and then this is what he calls the Stiletto, which is basically a long dovetail saw. And so I find that when you dovetail with this saw, 1, maybe 2 strokes and you're at your line. I like to cut dovetails quickly. I don't do it competitively. You will never see me shoot a video with a stopwatch in the corner showing you how fast I can cut something, because quite frankly, who cares? But this just lets me be efficient in the shop, which I think everybody likes to do. But yeah, those are my bad axe saws. There's 4. There may be more. I don't know. It depends what Mark comes up with. But whatever he's selling, I'm buying it, because I just I like his work. I like his tools. I like his attention to detail. And I like that everything is highly functional.
Awesome. I'm going to just go a little out of order because there's another one about the chest. Could you build a mobile base for that chest?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, you could. And I actually thought about raising it a little bit, just so that I'm not as bent over. But again, I'm not going in and out of it as much as I thought I would be. But yeah, absolutely. You could construct, it would have to be a heavy base though. Like it would have to really be able to take the strain, because that is a heavy chunk of material right there. So between the bottom, even empty, it's heavy. So you start piling it full of metal tools and then it gets really heavy. But yes, absolutely. You could raise it up and then put appropriately sized casters on there, and then you could roll that around wherever you want. But yeah, for sure.
Cool. I'll get back to another one from Chris. But something that has not been addressed is water. So a question here is, how do you stay hydrated in your remote shop? But there's also things like water sources. Right. Sink. Yeah. Washer.
Yeah. Good. Good question. So you're right. There is no water in this shop. And so I don't need water as much as I used to. So because what I typically used water for was for the sharpening area, with the stones, water stones and that kind of stuff. Now that I'm using the Tormek, it's got its reservoir, and what I'll likely do is just keep a 5-gallon bucket of water in here, put a couple of drops of bleach in it just to stop it from going like stinky and stagnant. And then I'll just kind of dip into that. It'll be just like, the old days where you had a well and you had to go to the well and get the water. Any wastewater, like if I have to wash anything, then I'll likely do that in the house, because we have like a utility sink in the basement. Quite frankly, I did think about running water out here, but it would have involved a whole separate trench on the other side of the house. So couldn't use, kind of a similar area. And I just, to be honest, I only ever had one shop that had water in it, and it wasn't that big of a deal. So, so as far as the other sort of, what else you would use water for, we have a pretty private backyard. I grew up in Northern Ontario, where basically the world is your urinal. And so there are trees out back here that get watered. Anything more than that, we don't really need to discuss in this forum. But if it's anything more than recycling coffee, then I will make the 100-foot walk into the house.
Cool. Got some laughs. Speaking of some sharpening, do you use the standard Tormek stone or the diamond stone?
Yes.
Yes to both.
Yes. So I use, this is the standard gray stone that you normally see on there. If I have to do a lot of heavy stock removal, then I have the diamond, right, so that I can do that. But for the most part, like this is pretty coarse. Even though this is the fine wheel, I find this pretty darn coarse. So really, where it comes in handy is when you get a new tool. So everybody always says the Tormek is slow, and there's only one spot where I would say that maybe that might be true. If you're reestablishing an angle, let's say you're going from 30 to 35, or if it's the first time you're hollow grinding your tools and you have to remove a lot of material, then it can be slower than a traditional grinder. But the trade-off is that you're never going to burn your edges, which when you're reestablishing edges on chisels using a high-speed grinder or even a slow-speed grinder, you really run the risk of burning. And sometimes you don't have to see burn in order to have the effect of temper being drawn. So I'm always kind of warning people about that. So in this case here, I keep the gray wheel on here normally.
That's the standard stone?
Yeah, that's the standard stone, yeah. I typically don't end up using even the gray stone all that often. Once you establish your edge, what I do is I flip this over so that I'm using, which side am I on here? Yeah. So if I'm using, this is kind of a glimpse into what we're going to cover on the course. And yes, I use it on my Japanese chisels. All the Japanese tool purists are going to freak out when they see this. But yes, I do use this on Japanese tools because there's absolutely no reason why you can't. But basically what I do is that when I sense that my chisel is starting to get dull, all I do is come over here and I just place this on here and I put the heel down and then feel it grab. And then now I'm just honing that. And then I'm just going to do a quick back off here. Okay, and now my chisel is nice and sharp again. Okay, so I'm a big believer in the philosophy of grind once, polish forever. Okay, the idea is that don't let your tools get to the point where you need to go to a coarse wheel. Okay, as soon as I feel that this is starting to not feel good, I just come over here, put it on the leather strop it, take a little bit of a burr off the back and carry on woodworking. I know, there's going to be people freaking out because I did this, okay, with no precision, but the reality is that I'm removing so little material that I'm not going to take these out of flat. You can argue theory all you want. If you want, this is not the place to argue that because you won't get anywhere with me because I really couldn't care less about theory. I'm all about practicality. And so I use that leather wheel all the time. And that's basically, once I've established my edges, now I'm just keeping them up.
Okay, so we're definitely onto a Tormek interest.
Oh dear.
That's okay though. So I want to it's kind of tying into webinars as well.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap up this one. Where are we? When is the class for Tormek sharpening? I just looked. It is Sunday, October 25th, 11 to 1. That will still be Eastern Daylight Time.
Correct.
We're not into daylight savings yet.
Yeah.
And then do you get it says no round over with the leather wheel?
No. Stropping is always like, people always worry about stropping and whether or not you're going to back off the edge or whatever, but it really has to do with pressure. The amount of pressure that you put down, the thickness of the leather, all of those things are a factor. Obviously, if I were to lean into that leather wheel and like really push down on it, but you don't need to. Like, let the machine do the work. Your power stropping, so very, very little pressure. And the leather on there is quite thin and very, very hard. So I've never had a problem tipping off my edges.
Awesome. And then just continuing on some webinar topics.
Yep.
Chris was asking, is the mallet class we're hosting going to be the mallet you made in your first book?
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, it's going to be this mallet. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna cover how to kind of split this in half, and then we're going to do the layout, because the joinery obviously is angled. So we're going to talk about how to lay that out, how to cut it accurately, and then basically how to put it together. So it's basically a course on layout and angled mortising, and then the rest is basically shaping and stuff like that. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so that's a two-part webinar.
Yeah. So this is the first time we're trying this. We're doing a two-parter for the mallet, and then we're doing a four-part one on doing a dovetailed box. So the idea is that we can sort of get to a certain point, and then I sort of turn you loose. You're always welcome in the week in between. If you have questions, send me photos. Hey, this went wrong, or what did I do here, or whatever. The whole idea is that I keep the class sizes small so that I can give maximum support. If I had 50 people participating, there's no way that I could do that. But in this case here, we have like a smaller group of people. I can keep up on emails. I can even do a little FaceTime action. Or Zoom or whatever in order to answer questions. But, theory is great and technique is great, but in the end, I think we are all being woodworkers, we want to build stuff. And so I'm picking projects. And if you have any project ideas that you want to see done, then we can do that. But the box that we're going to be doing is going to be sort of a smaller version of this. Okay, this is a little bit larger. This is my first aid kit. It's got Band-Aids, and then there's heavier duty stuff underneath there for when I really, like if I remove a digit or something like that. But I'm not too worried about it. But anyway, just doing multiple dovetails, putting on a lid. This one is pretty simple. This was designed as a shop box, so it has an applied bottom, and it's just kind of nailed into place. But yeah, it's going to be something similar to that, which will allow you to sort of understand all the steps. It's one thing to dovetail a corner together. It's another thing to dovetail a box together, because order of operations becomes important, and layout and forethought, how you assemble it, all that stuff comes into play.
All right. So if you only have, let me make sure I get this right. If you only have chisels and no router plane, can you still make the mallet?
Oh yeah. Yeah, absolutely. You don't need a router plane.
No.
No, you don't need a router. You don't need any of that. And I'll be talking about the different methods of waste removal. And one of them is chisel. The other thing that you can add to a chisel is using a flat file that has safe edges on it. In this case here, this is a Nicholson Super Shear. This can allow you to flatten the bottom very easily without worrying about cutting the sides, because it's got safe edges. Okay. So you can use joinery floats, you can use chisels, there's all kinds of ways to make dados, and we're going to cover the majority of them. And if you take a class and you have a very specific tool set and I'm not covering it, then you just ask the question, right? Because all the webinars are very interactive. I, again, purposefully keep them low numbers so that we can talk, we can chat. The whole class benefits from the questions. It's not just kind of a sit there and watch what's happening and not get to ask questions and stuff, because that's not a good learning environment.
Yeah, trying to mimic in person as much as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I really miss teaching. I used to teach a lot, And so, not being able to teach has been kind of a bummer for me. It's been the biggest sort of thing with this whole COVID thing. So for me, being able to mimic that, with some interaction and stuff like that, I think we're all kind of craving that. And then in the meantime, you get to make something and learn how stuff is done. So
cool. 2 questions.
Yep.
I'll start with this one because it's just sort of more straightforward.
Yep.
What is the length on the crosscut and rip? Oh dear.
Oh, of the back
Rip
axe?
that. Yes.
Yeah. Good question. So the crosscut blade is 24.5 and the rip is 22.
All right.
Yeah.
And now that you have this whole new shop
Yes.
with some change up of equipment, tools, what are you building? What do you want to build?
Oh my God. You know what? It's so funny. Like,
Or let's do that 2 ways versus what do you want to build or what are you specifically building, whether it's for projects, articles?
yeah, no, that's really good. So all of the content for the next book has been done. I've shot it. I've written it. It's in the hands of the publisher right now. So I'm not having to do.
That was built in the old shop.
That was built in the old shop. So in this shop, I have a couple of projects there's a couple of shop projects that I like to do. A new bench is one of them. The cabinets is another one. But furniture-wise, I've had this idea brewing in my head about a record stand. So being able to put my record player, amplifier, and then storage for albums as well. So I've had an idea sort of percolating in my head that I'm going to do. That may end up actually being an article for Australian Wood Review. Haven't hashed out the details yet, but either way, that's going to be the first thing. I also I want to build a bowl stand for Bruno, so that labs famously kind of have problems over the years if they have to go like right down to eat. So I'm going to build an elevated stand, just kind of waiting for him to kind of get to his height, which the way he's growing right now, Andrea keeps feeding him, and so he keeps growing, and so. So I want to do that, and of course that's going to be more fancy than it ever needs to be. Dovetails and through mortise and tenon joinery, and I'm going to throw everything at it. I may even veneer it, who knows? But yeah, so those things I want to do. My goal, of course, is that by the time I'm dead, that every piece of furniture in the house is built by me. So I'm just going to start, we have some IKEA pieces that have served us well, but, they're IKEA pieces, so I'm going to start to kind of chip away at building that kind of stuff. So there's no lack of projects.
Table repair.
Oh yeah. Yeah. A horrible thing happened when we moved. My dining table that I had built, beautiful, solid walnut top, maple legs. Anyway, an unfortunate incident happened moving day, and as the movers were bringing it off the truck, one of the movers fell off the ramp, which I feel bad about, don't get me wrong. I'm sorry that he fell off the ramp, but my table went with him. And so there's, one of the legs is euchred, and I have to, and the top is cracked. And anyway, I haven't posted anything about it because I'm still not okay with it. I'm still a little bit upset. So I'm trying to not go there, but I have to repair the table. And so I think with the style of table, I'm going to end up shortening the table a little bit and recutting joinery and stuff like that. So anyway, so that's another thing that's going to get done. But yeah, that's, and then of course there's, I'm writing articles for various magazines and that sort of thing. So that of course, also drives content. I'm fortunate where I can kind of pick a project and then see if a magazine is interested in it as an article, and then I just photograph it and write about it and go from there. So
cool. We've had a couple people signing off here and there.
Okay.
But 2 other things. So we didn't talk about lighting, and oh dear, was the MFT T3 fiddly to dial in?
Oh, no.
Sometimes the jargon and stuff, I don't know the
Yeah,
word.
yeah, yeah. You don't know all the words. It's
No.
okay. No, so the MFT is not hard to set up. There's a very, like when you get one of them, there's a set of instructions. But I picked up this from Woodpeckers, which is basically just a giant square. And it allows me, I mean, obviously I have to set this lower, but it allows me to kind of set up the fence so that it's good. You know, once you set this rail in place, then you can square everything up, and it's actually quite easy to do. It's not frustrating at all. And again, like having the head is nice because you can work angles now, and then having stops that you can position anywhere on the fence in order to do kind of multiple cuts is handy as well. So no, not a problem at all. I found it's really easy. I think it's easier to square up than table saw is, but that's just me. Lighting, that's a good point.
Lighting versus task lighting.
Right. So we didn't talk about lighting, but in the ceiling were these sort of fancy pot, big sort of lights that were already mounted here. So typically I would use something like T4s that you would typically see for shop lighting. This is great. It gives me enough light. And then, of course, I'm always a huge believer in having task lighting wherever you're working specifically, so that you can see what's going on. Of course, the more experienced your eyes are, the more of this you need. But basically, if you look around the shop, there is lighting in all the critical areas. There's one on my bandsaw.
To saws, do you sharpen your own saws?
Absolutely not. No. You know what? It's funny. I took a course with Mark Harrell down at his shop, and he taught me how to sharpen saws. And what I realized is that the reason why Mark Harrell is such a good saw sharpener is well, one, he's innately talented, but as well, he does it every day. And so I think about my saws, my bad axe saws I've owned for many, many years, and they're still nice and sharp. So to go multiple years in between doing a task as precision oriented as saw sharpening, it's not something that, like, the skill fade is enormous for me. So some people may not find that, but personally, when those bad axe saws get dull, I'll be sending them right back to Mark, and he can sharpen them for me, because it's something I don't mind paying for, because I know it's going to work out well.
Awesome. I think I have gotten to everything. We've had a lot of people sign off just because they got to get to life and groceries or finish up drywall repairing, kept them company.
Nice.
So we've got a few people left. I know we said 2 hours, but that was just to have that window.
Yeah.
So I suppose we could just sort of leave it for any last comments or questions.
Yeah, and again, if you think of any questions after the fact, you can message me on Instagram, Facebook. You can send me an email. You can leave a comment. I'll see it there. But yeah, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If you have any questions about what we're doing as far as webinars and stuff like that, again, please feel free to ask. This is my full-time gig now. This is, Vic Tesolin Woodworks is what I'm doing for a living these days. So, I'm all for, the education component has always been huge for me, because I've always felt that I was lucky to have the education that I did and studied with some of the woodworkers that I have. And I feel that it's important to pass that on. So if you're interested in anything like that, by all means, visit the website or check out Instagram and Facebook. Otherwise, and if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell whatever that means. And I may end up exploring doing a little bit more on YouTube. We'll see how that goes. But my main social media is Instagram. So I appreciate you coming out and spending some time on a Saturday morning / afternoon to hang out in my shop. This has been the most people I've had in my shop, obviously with COVID. So I'm glad that you could be here. Anyhow, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.